Welcome to our podcast today. It is a podcast in spiritual leadership. I'm your host, Charles Kyker, and thank you for joining us today. Last time I was with you, we kind of had a devotion of, I think, of encouragement and challenge. But the beginning of February, we talked about in our leadership, Mastering the Rockefeller Habits, which is a book I've been reading from Vern Harnish, and really felt like it's his consulting with major Fortune 500 companies and a lot of the practical principles is worth us visiting as well. And then I want to, for clarity's sake, that I have just had a wonderful time of spending 2 days with Craig Rochelle at Life Church in Oklahoma City, as well as several outstanding leaders who are part of the Global Leadership Summit. And so we're kind of mingling some of those principles that I learned out there as well. But our last time together, we talked about the major focus of Vern Harnish's book was kind of threefold. One, he focuses on leadership growth to select the right people to do the right things. And then number two, he talks about developing healthy systems for growth. Developing healthy systems for growth. So the first part is to get the right people to do the right things. Number two, develop healthy systems for growth. Number three, he talks about to recognize and navigate market trends for growth. And last month, of course, we did focus on getting the right people to do the right things. Today, we're focused on developing healthy systems for growth. Developing healthy systems for growth. And in our one-year Bible reading from the book of Numbers, I often do the kind of the tease that people sometimes accuse churches, especially growing churches and churches that are thriving, that you all are just concerned about numbers. And we say, well, there's actually a book in the Bible called Numbers. And so evidently God's concerned about numbers. Jesus speaks of numbers on a consistent basis. He tells the story in Luke chapter 15 about a certain shepherd who had 100 sheep and one went off. And so he left the 99 who were not necessarily safe and secure. They were still there in the wilderness and still could have been prey to wolves or to the elements. But he went after the one who was separated and the one who was lost. Jesus, of course, fed how many people when they were hungry? 4,000 on one occasion, 5,000 on another occasion. Somebody was counting back then. And we believe at Christ Church that we count because people count. People matter. Well, here in the book of Numbers, there's actually an incredible system going on among the Levites. And so I want to make sure you understand this is among the Levites and those who would help the priest in ministering worship and ministering in the temple. So we're in Numbers 4, and I'm just going to highlight some of the scriptures here because there are several different divisions among the Levites. In verse 34 of chapter 4 of Numbers, it says, So Moses, Aaron, and the other leaders of the community listed the members of the Kohathite division by their clans and families. The list included all the men between 30 and 50 years of age. That number came to 2,750. He goes on in verse 38 to say, the Gershonite division was also listed among the clans. This list included also men between 30 and 50, and their number was 2,630. He goes on in verse 42 to talk about the Merarite division was also listed among the clans and families, and this list included men 30 to 50. Their total number was 3,200. And then verse 46, so Moses and Aaron and the leaders of Israel listed all the Levites by their clans and families, and all the men between 30 and 50 years of age who were eligible for service in the tabernacle and for its transportation, numbered a total of 8,580. When their names were recorded as the Lord had commanded through Moses, each man was assigned his task and told what to carry. And so the registration was completed just as the Lord had commanded Moses. And so here again, God is working through Moses, the leader, to organize and have a healthy system of worship so that the priest would be in charge and the Levites would actually administer along with them. Healthy systems are vital to any organization being healthy. And today we want to focus on that reality. And at the meeting I had last week, being with Craig Groeschel, who's kind of the primary voice of the Global Leadership Summit now, and has a regular podcast on leadership. If you haven't heard that, I would strongly urge you to look up Craig Groeschel's podcast. He gives at least once, if not twice. He gives at least 2 leadership podcasts a month, usually on Thursdays. But he was speaking that coming out of COVID in a post-COVID kind of world, it's very important to be clear about your goals. He was talking about a lot of the staff, people in their 20s and 30s, and even older folks are in a fog. A lot of people are in a fog. And there's a lot of issues about people just being weary and even working 6-hour days, feeling exhausted. And Craig said this is something that he's hearing from a lot of his elders and people who have other persons in the workplace. And so he said it's even more important in an organization, a business, a profit, nonprofit, that we be clear about our goals. And then he really emphasized how important it is that the larger the organization gets, paradoxically, how important it is to simplify your process, And he said that simplicity creates growth and complexity kills growth. So simplify your process. Simplicity creates growth and complexity kills growth. Seems as the organization gets bigger, then we think, well, we got to have a policy for this. Then we got to have a procedure for that. And pretty soon you're so weighed down in paperwork and policies that the creativity that you once spent time on creating things and launching initiatives begins to be something that's kind of put aside because you're spending time managing the behemoth instead of really realizing what your whole reason for existence is and trying to focus on that. Christ Church's mission statement is to reach millions of unchurched persons by developing thousands of fully devoted followers of Jesus Christ. That's our mission. And we try to help even hone in on that and clarify it by some mantras. One mantra has been for many, many years, Christ Church will do whatever it takes short of sin to reach lost people for Jesus Christ. I mean, we'll do whatever it takes. And our other mantra is our mission is to help attenders to serve others for Christ. We used to have it this way, and it didn't seem to resonate very much, but we want to move people from passengers on the cruise to crew members. We don't want you just to be a passenger. You can be a passenger for a while. You can be an attender for a while, but eventually we want to move you to claiming the mission of the ship, and that's to become a crew member. The cool thing is you'd always be on a cruise. But really, to shorten that, our mission is to help attenders to serve others for Christ. In other words, we have a 2-part mission statement. It's to reach people, but then it's also to create fully devoted followers. So a lot of churches will celebrate the baptisms that they have. These are the people that have been baptized in a given year, and that's important, and that's great. But how many of those people have stepped from baptism into actually serving others and becoming fully devoted followers? How many of your attendees are actually empowered to be missionaries? How many of you are actually serving? I mean, the last probably 6 months, I've noticed something that's just rising to my consciousness. We've had a lot of people attend our various, what we call devoted followers classes at Christ Church, people who want to join. But I don't see hardly anybody under the age of 30. So I want to know, where are our 11 and our 12-year-olds? Where are our 14-year-olds? Where are our 10 or 11-year-olds? Because if we're going to move people into being fully devoted followers of Christ, we need to start young, children, students. A major leader of a large church, one of the top 10 in the nation, said it really was an aha moment for him that when his daughter came home from college, they were just having some late night chat, and she brought a friend with her to spend the night. They were both, I think, juniors or seniors in college. And just talking to his daughter's friend, he learned that she actually grew up at that church. She started when she was in the 7th grade going to the youth ministry. And he said, that's cool. So he said, so when did you join? She said, I never joined. And he said, what do you mean you never joined? She said, well, it was never brought up. Nobody ever invited me to join. I didn't know you were supposed to join. I didn't know you were supposed to be a member or anything like that. I just came to youth ministry and I enjoyed it. And she said it was pretty cool, and I learned some things about God and how I could, navigate life, and it was a good experience. But no, I never joined. And he was like, man, we missed the boat. We missed the boat. So how are we moving people? Reaching people's great, but then we want people to be devoted followers. So are we clear about our mission? And then what systems do we have in place to help us accomplish our goals of both reaching and developing? And so here are some goals. Just want to share some clear goals that I think you can use in any organization. And this is kind of a compilation of as I mentioned, Vern's work, Vern Harnish, and then some of the things I learned at the Global Leadership Summit base camp, as they called it. And so let's look at those. First of all, clearly state your why or your when. And those can be joined together. Why do you exist? Why do you exist? What does your organization do? Do you produce a product? Do you manufacture something? Or are you providing a service? What's your why? What's your why? And then what's your win? WIN. What's your win? In other words, your why should drive you to win. I mean, are we producing 1,000 generators a month? And what if we produced 1,010? And what if we sold 1,100? In other words, we're sold more than what we produce. That's a win. Celebrate that. But what's your why? What are you in business for? Is your why to help train 2,000 clients a month, coach 2,000 people, and that's your goal? And now you've got 2,500 signed up, so that's a win. Celebrate that. What if your goal is 2,000 and you're at 1,100? Well, if you were at 500 last time 6 months ago, and now you're at 1,500, you didn't reach your goal of 2,000, but my goodness, you got 1,000 more than you had 6 months ago. Celebrate your win. But what is your why? What is your why? Number 2, clearly state and live into your mission. Clearly state and live into your mission. Some people call it a purpose, but I prefer to call it a mission, because most nonprofit organizations have a mission. Most organizations today have a mission. I go into all kinds of different organizations that are businesses or service industries, and they have a mission statement up on the wall. So I think we understand that, but clearly stated. Can you go down the hall at a manufacturing company? Can you go down the hall at a company that serves people? Wherever you bank, if you do go into a brick and mortar bank. A lot of people don't even have one. Actually, I have a credit union that's not even in the state that I live in, and that's where I have my regular checking account. But there are banks in the community I live in, and I do have to go into them from time to time. I enjoy just asking people, tell me what your mission statement is. And it's incredible to watch people begin to stumble because they don't know what it is. Does the average person who works there know their mission statement? Do they clearly know their goals? Can they tell you what they're working on for the next 6 or 8 weeks? Those of you listening to this podcast right now, the organization you're in, can the people that you're associated with, can they tell you what goals you're working on right now? What are your goals? What is your mission statement? And then one in particular are you working on right now? Number 3, give a 6 to 8 week strategy of how to achieve a win. Give a 6 or 8 week strategy of how to achieve a win. Now, it's one thing to say this is a win, but then how do we go from here to there? How do we get there to achieve a win? How do we get there to achieve it? What's the strategy? How are we going to get there? I think often we feel frustrated if we say, okay, that's the goal, that's great, that's the win, but how can we and what can we do to get there? What's 1 or 2 things we can focus on the next 6 or 8 weeks to accomplish the win? Number 4, celebrate the wins, which can lead to our bags, our big, hairy, audacious goals. So you want to identify your bag, your BHAG, but celebrate the wins, which can lead to us accomplishing a big, hairy, audacious goal. What we're saying there is that it's important to have small wins along the way so that you can give people encouragement and hope that a BHAG, that a big, hairy, audacious goal can be accomplished. People typically will repeat what you celebrate. They'll repeat what you celebrate. If you celebrate, baptisms, if you celebrate joining in the life of a church, people will want to help the church get there, whatever you celebrate. In your company, if you celebrate sales or if you celebrate production, whatever it is, people will want to repeat it. So celebrate it, lift people up, lift up the achievements, celebrate even the small things so that you can also lean into the larger goals of the organization. And then make your mission bite-sized and simplified. Make your mission bite-sized and simplified. Again, all too often, we have multiple procedures in order to get to a win or to get to a goal, but how can we simplify it? In other words, what's absolutely necessary? What's absolutely necessary? And sometimes that helps us to weed out also thinking about staffing and staffing for growth. How do we staff for growth? What positions are absolutely essential? What support positions are absolutely essential? And how can we simplify those in order to get greater achievement? Something that Craig talked about was that they were right at 94,000 in attendance in 2019. 94,000 in attendance. When the pandemic hit, of course, they went from 94,000 down to probably 52 or 53,000 online views, people watching online, etc. And so that was almost in half. Now they're back up to 87,000. What that 52, 53,000 in attendance taught them is, how can we do more with less? How can we do more with less? What are the essentials? What do we need to do? And what staff positions can help us actually maximize our goals? In other words, do we need all of these positions? The goal wasn't to try to necessarily get rid of people, but the goal was to say what positions are absolutely important, and then who can actually be a support person to the positions that are ultimately important. And how do you simplify the process? So that taught them a lot during the situation. They realized that, work remotely when you have to. Work remotely when you have to. And otherwise come in as often as you can. They began to realize that personal interface and personal connection is important. We're talking about a community that believes that God created us for community. God created us for community. So if we believe that in 2019 and 2018, why would we ditch it in 2024? We believe God created us for community, and God created us for interfacing and for sharing and for encouraging one another, for also having fun and enjoying and doing life together. And it's hard to do that remote. And therefore, there needs to be somewhat of a combination. If there are times you need to work remote because of health issues, health of a family member, some other things, that's understandable. So work remotely when you have to. But interface and come in and be a part of things as often as you can, because we also want to be interfacing with the people we're trying to train and equip, the people we're trying to reach, and the people we're trying to impact. An example right now, if I can share from Christ Church in the next 6 weeks is going bigger while focusing on the one. We're going bigger while focusing on the one. Earlier this year, I met with the leadership team and many of the staff and the leaders, and I talked about each one bringing one, each one focusing on the one. If we could truly invigorate and challenge our worshipers to think about one coworker that they could pray for, one neighbor, one friend that they could build a relationship with, and invite that one person at a time to attend worship or to attend their life group or to just simply build a relationship with that person. Craig Rochelle talked about how he and his wife Amy were going for the next several months to a particular restaurant, and they have really enjoyed getting to know this one waitress, and they request her whenever they come. She's got tattoos on both arms. She's a single parent, and they've built a relationship with her. And of course, while they're there, they just talk about life. He said, "My goal's not to preach. My goal's just to build a relationship with this one person." And she knows what I do. She knows what Amy does. Amy has a ministry for women that have been abused, for women who struggle with identity and worth, and they've had a wonderful chance to interface together. This woman can relate to having a sordid past, and they're just there to care for her. She claims to be somewhere between an atheist and an agnostic, but they're there just to build a relationship, focusing on the one. Here's the problem. When you get bigger, you often forget the one. When you get bigger, you forget the one. And it's no wonder Jesus led, the parable that Jesus tells about the 100 sheep and the shepherd that had and left the 99 to go after the one begins when Jesus is eating with tax collectors and sinners. And the Pharisees and the Sadducees say, "Look, he is eating with such scum. We can't believe who Jesus is hanging out with." And then Jesus overhears their negative comments, says, "What man among you having 100 sheep?" And then he tells the parable of the coins as well. And then he eventually gets to the parable of the lost son. But our goal at Christ Church during 2024 is to each one bring one, invite one. But we're really focused over these next 6 weeks, because we're leading up to Easter, is to try to get our worshipers to invite one. I shared this vision in a recent newsletter article of what the vision was that I shared with the leadership team. And we're going to be maximizing this, and we're going to be what we call preaching the announcements over the next several weeks, as our theme is unreasonable faith. We're going to talk about believing in a God of unreasonable capacity and unreasonable love, because he loves us unconditionally, of how we can each reach one. And we're going to cast vision for that as we lead up to Easter. Then we're challenging people, hey, if you've never been baptized, we want you to consider being baptized in the faith. And we would love for you, if you make a profession of faith in Christ on Easter, to come back and be baptized at one of the campuses that you attend. Now, if we just did that and stopped there, we would only be living out half of our mission statement. So what we need to do is engage and re-engage the persons who profess faith, persons who've been baptized, and invite them personally to be part of a life group, personally involved in some discipleship, mentoring through children's ministry, through student ministry, and through life groups and other avenues, to be able to let them know that we care about them and we want them to have a place to belong. Our mission is reaching and developing. So we've got to make sure we don't just focus on reaching, but we've also got to focus on developing so that they can belong. And people usually want to belong before they believe. So we want to focus on letting them have a place that they can belong, whether it's regular worship and then eventually moving into some kind of life group, some kind of discipleship. Our one-year Bible reading today actually focuses on the one, because Jesus has asked the question, what's the heart of the law, or what is the great commandment? And Jesus, of course, says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, your soul, your strength, and your mind. And he doesn't stop there. Jesus pushes it, and he says, and to love your neighbor as yourself. Now, not in this particular one, but in another gospel, the gentleman asked, who is my neighbor? And then Jesus, of course, goes into the parable of the man who was on his way down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he fell among thieves and robbers, and he was beaten up. And then this guy from Samaria comes along, and he gets off of his donkey, and he ministers to the guy, and he serves him, and he cares for him. Jesus is implying that to love your neighbor is to serve your neighbor, care for your neighbor in need. And at Christ Church, we've got to move people from attenders, people who attend, to people who serve, people who care for their neighbor, because that's the only way any of us will become a devoted follower. So again, we need to go back to realizing that we need to state clearly our why. Why are we here? We need to state, live into our mission. And we need to have a 6 or 8 week strategy of how to accomplish a win, even if it's a small win, no matter what your organization or your company does, your nonprofit, then celebrate the wins. Let's celebrate them. In our staff meetings, we have Yay Gods, where we share small wins, or we just share something that somebody does as an act of generosity, or somebody actually goes the extra mile. Sometimes somebody might be in one particular team, and they may actually help and serve a whole nother team that's not even in their job description or their responsibility, but they're doing it for the greater mission. So we celebrate that. Now, you can't do that all the time, but from time to time, it's necessary. From time to time, help out another area of the staff or the church, because it's really, at the end of the day, it's all about the mission, leaving nothing on the field and trying to help win for the kingdom. And then identify your bag. What's the big, hairy, audacious goal? Our mission statement, we could say, is a big, hairy, audacious goal. But in order to accomplish it, we have to have small wins along the way in order to get there. So several times through the year, we'll have what we call sprints. And right now, we're in a sprint running up to Easter. And we want to celebrate that. We've already preached the message for Easter. We've already purposely put in there a response to the gospel for people to say yes to Christ. We want to have a follow-up for that. We want to invite people to be baptized. And then we also want to put into place a response for the baptism and for people to be discipled, whether they're children, students, or adults. So no matter what your organization is, no matter what your mission is, I think having a good system to accomplish it is worthwhile. It's what it's all about. And I hope you get to celebrate a lot of wins in the next few weeks and the next few months. Thank you for being a part of the podcast today.